Welcome to the Goddess School podcast, where Eastern wisdom meets Western mysticism. I'm your host, Lisa Marie Rankin, author, teacher, and Ayurvedic wellness coach, here to help you reclaim your feminine superpowers. And I am so glad you're here. Listen, women are magical. They are intuitive, creative, wise, and magnetic. However, in today's fast-paced world, these gifts often get buried under a more masculine way of life. Together, we'll awaken those powers. In each episode, I'll take you through sacred teachings like Ayurveda, shadow work, and the mysteries of archetypes and rituals, so you can live with more clarity, synchronicity, and joy in all realms of life, like relationships, health, money, and more. So let's dive in so you can make the most of your one mythic life. The veil is parting. Let's begin. Hello, hello. Today, Andrea Tessier is joining me as we dive into internal family systems, shadow work, and connecting to your highest self. Andrea is a master life coach and IFS practitioner. She's passionate about guiding heart-centered leaders through transformative inner work. She helps individuals navigate life transitions, break through limiting beliefs, and align with their true selves. Today, we're going to talk about the parts like the inner child and inner critic and how we can integrate these parts so you can live with more resiliency, courage, and joy. You are going to love this conversation. Hey, Andrea, how are you doing today?
So good. Really excited for this conversation, Lisa.
Fantastic. So I am so excited to introduce you to my community. So Andrea Tessier is a master coach, and she really specializes in internal family systems, which don't worry if you don't even know what that means, because we are going to dive into that today. But what I really love about this subject, so many from my community, we do a lot of work based on Carl Jung, and we work with archetypes, particularly divine feminine archetypes, shadow work, ritual, really Western mysticism, and how we can connect to self, or as I like to say, the inner goddess. And I really think that IFS, internal family systems, is so in line with what we're doing. And sometimes it's a little bit different terminology, but sometimes not. And I think it's just a great way to look at both personal development and spiritual work. Now, to me, personal development and spiritual work are one and the same. I know some people might think that they're a little bit different, but they're all about how do we want to show up in this world? How do we want to become our best selves? I guess spiritual is how do we connect with a force that's greater than us? But it's really, to me and to my community, it's the same thing. So really looking forward to diving in with you today, Andrea. I guess we can get started. Like, what is internal family systems?
Yeah, amazing. And so internal family systems, and I see it a lot like how you work with your clients and groups in terms of shadow work. And it's another way of really understanding and exploring the parts of us that we might not like very much. And there are so many parallels. It's just a different model. It's a different way of talking about ourselves and understanding ourselves. So internal family systems, or IFS, which is usually what I will call it just in the short form, we sometimes call it parts work as well. It's based on the work by Dr. Richard Schwartz, which he started in the 80s. He is the founder of it. And the idea is that we all have this really intricate network of parts or sub-personalities or aspects of ourselves. And I love to explain it like, if you think about the last time you were invited to a party, part of you wanted to go, guarantee part of you wanted to stay home. And underneath those two parts, you probably even had a part that had FOMO, that felt guilty, a part that was like managing your schedule or what do you bring for the host. And all of those take up a lot of energetic real estate. Typically, we think about that as a matter of having conflicted thoughts or just overthinking. But from an internal family systems lens, we believe that all of those thoughts are parts of us with different thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and emotions that actually make a lot of sense. So there are all these essences within us with their own desires and needs and wants that actually need our attention. And more not so regular day-to-day stuff, parts are like parts of us that have perfectionism, parts of us like the inner critic, parts of us that have people-pleasing tendencies, parts of us that overthink, parts of us that are hyper managers. And so the idea is that we can get to know and understand this whole network, the system. It works like a family. And in doing so, we begin to soothe these aspects of ourselves because they start to get their needs met. And in doing so, our whole system becomes more harmonious. Our whole system comes into more and more equilibrium. And we can start to move through life as this very empowered, self-led person rather than being overrun by these protective, more juvenile aspects of ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I love that example about going to the party just because that sounds like me every time I'm trying to leave the house. Do we really want to do it? Yes, we should leave the house. So it's such a great example. Now, you said they're more juvenile parts. Would you say that these parts are like younger parts, or what do you mean by juvenile?
Yeah. So a lot of our parts are developed while we're growing up. And so the idea is that they come online to help us either survive or cope with trauma, whether that's a big T trauma or a small T trauma. They come online to help protect us from harm or discomfort. They sometimes come online to help us get shit done or feel motivated. These parts often bring us pleasure or relief. Sometimes that's through healthy outlets. Other times it's through something like addiction.
Mhm.
They also come online to help distract us from painful feelings or memories. And so most of that's happening when we don't have people around us, caregivers around us to support our needs. And so our system, which is brilliant, is like, well, I can help with this. And so we develop these patterns or these parts to come online to support us when we don't have the support around us that can do it. And so, yeah, that generally happens. Most parts are young, 25 and younger for sure. Most parts, even when you get to the root of them, are younger than 8 years old. Some manager type parts. Managers are the parts of us that like to get things done in the right order so nothing falls apart. Right? There are scheduling parts. They're the parts that are thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead. It's the part that like loves the to-do list. Manager parts might come online like more like adolescence, teenagehood, because they've got shit figured out by now.
Oh, yeah. My teenagers know everything.
Yes. Yes. And it's all to say that most of these protector parts come online to really support the more exiled parts, really tender, sweet. I like to call it the exiled inner child, parts of us that have been feared and shamed and pushed into submission into the shadows. So we develop this whole network of parts to protect them, to make sure that they are okay. And usually those exiled inner children are very young and sweet and tender.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I love thinking of them as younger because it's a reminder to have compassion for them. Now, I remember a while back when I first started dating my partner, and I had a very anxious attachment. I was very constantly looking at my phone. If I didn't hear from him, immediately thought that it was over. And luckily, I was working with a therapist at this time, and she started to explain this concept to me of an inner child. And I remember saying, but she's ruining my life. I shouldn't be this anxious. I am a competent, successful woman. She's going to ruin my relationship. And she was like, you need to stop yelling at her. That's just going to make it worse. So I think really thinking of these parts as not out to sabotage us or ruin our lives, but parts of us that we need to care for. Could you talk a little bit? What do these parts want from us?
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up because we've learned, whether it's explicitly or implicitly, to shame and vilify anything about ourselves that doesn't align with who we think we could or should be. And so we have really shamed parts of us that are more anxious, parts of us that we judge as more needy, parts of us that were like, well, this one's going to ruin my relationship. I don't like this. Get it out of here.
That was very much me. Yes.
Yeah. And we really do shame and judge anything that makes us not seem like a good person. that's all around us from society, right? And so to actually allow ourselves to be more compassionate with parts of us that we deem unworthy or that we don't like is incredibly healing, because we all have heard the term like time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That usually just means we have pushed it under the rug or shoved it into a closet and hope that it just stays there. But the truth is, it takes up a shit ton of energetic real estate to keep something suppressed for so long, whether we realize we're doing it or not. And what I love about internal family systems is that it's inherently compassionate. The model really asserts that the bigger those behaviors, the bigger the pain underneath. And so when we can start to relate to these aspects of ourselves as needing something from us, as trying to get their needs met, we can start to relate to them with more compassion and with more calm and curiosity, rather than like, hey, babe, get the hell out of here. You're ruining my life. and, and when we can think of them as younger, it almost allows us to soften into, well, like, oh, well, of course that makes sense. Of course that makes sense that you're hurting. And when we can relate to those aspects of ourselves in that way, these parts have really a lot of wisdom to share. Because in your example, it was kind of showing up in your relationship, but I guarantee it wasn't even about your relationship. It was the inner child that was triggered from something that happened when you were a little girl. And I know that because that's also true for me, right? It's also true for every single client that's ever come to me. It's like, okay, it's showing up now, but it's actually not about now. It's about whatever that hurt was when you were little. And when we can go there, it just like makes so much more sense. And when we can witness and then integrate that inner child, not shove them into the shadows and get rid of them, but when we can really integrate them, that's where we get to like really honestly move forward from a place of empowerment and start really cultivating and creating the lives that we want from this grown-up version of ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that's so important. There are a few things that I kind of want to connect. One, this is shadow work. I want people to understand, because these parts, they're in our subconscious. And that's really what shadow work is. What are the parts of ourselves that are really directing a good portion of our lives? Isn't it like 90 to 95% of our behaviors and actions are based on shadow parts? So when we can start to recognize that we have these parts, this is shadow work. And it's a lot more than just journaling. I think journaling is great, but we can feel them in our body. And if we look at like Jung's map of the psyche, the ego, so who I think I am, like who I try to present myself to be, is often at odds with the shadow. That's why it is the shadow, because there's parts that we've either repressed or suppressed. But of course, they always come out, and they often come out in romantic relationships, but they can come out with money and health and a bunch of other things as well too. So I just wanted to draw that parallel that like what we're doing in IFS is shadow work. But would you agree with that?
Completely. I think they're two totally different schools of thought. And that's why in internal family systems, we wouldn't use that terminology. But that's certainly the way that I see it and understand it and use it with my clients. As a coach, people come to us because they want to make changes in their lives, because they want to shift a pattern, they want to shift a habit, they want to call something in that they've never had before. And yes, it's a lot about accountability and action and creating a plan and a mindset. And if we aren't doing the active work with what's getting in the way of that, it makes all of that forward thinking stuff 100 times more difficult. Right? So yes, I absolutely see it like shadow work. And I see it as really the missing piece of a lot of people's manifestations. Or trying to call in the next partnership. We're trying to call in the career change. We're trying to call in the next level of wealth. And people get very frustrated because they're doing all the right things, right? I have the vision boards. I'm doing the law of attraction. They're like tapping into like Abraham Hicks and doing all the things. And like, why isn't it working? That's why, because it's true that we get what we desire. It is true. And oftentimes it's really unconscious parts of us that are doing the desiring.
Yes, I love that. I actually think we've talked about this before, maybe on Instagram, about Carolyn Elliott's book, Existential Kink, which I love. I think that's like a fantastic shadow book. And one of the premises is there is that having is evidence of wanting, meaning even if you think that you don't want this like terrible relationship, you keep dating or attracting the same type of men into your lives, there's a part of you, she would say, that actually does want, that actually feels comfortable for that. And that part of our work is to, well, one, like, oh, celebrate, like, great part, you got what you want, but really start to integrate it more so we can consciously choose what partners we want instead of really shadow manifesting, I guess you could call it. Is that sort of what you're talking about
Yeah,
when you're
like
talking about people try to manifest, but it's not working? And it's because, yeah, you haven't dealt with these parts that actually like the way things are right now.
yeah, like the way things are, or the inner child who asks, like, will this leap lead to pain? Right? Will I be hurt and humiliated in the process? And you said this already, but it's like oftentimes in these moments of our life where we're stretching ourselves, or we're stretching ourselves into a different relationship, or we're stretching ourselves into a different career path, or we're stretching ourselves into wanting something different. And what happens inside is parts of us are like, that's not safe, right? Am I going to be hurt, humiliated, shamed in the process? And so it gets to be both, right? We get to make these leaps in our lives. Like we get to claim our biggest desires. I am such a fan of that for anybody and everybody to have and be and do whatever it is they want. I actually believe that's what's going to create the shift on the planet that we need. And we only get to do that if we're also doing the parts work, if we're doing the work with our exiled inner child, if we're doing the work with the patterns and the parts that have served us for a time. And now maybe they're not anymore to take us into our next stage of evolution. So I think that's really important to understand is like these patterns and these parts worked. That's why they're here. They really did for a really long time. I had a similar experience as what you mentioned with your partner. I'm stretching myself into a conscious partnership at the moment. And I know all of the right things I should be doing. Like, I got it. I've been in this work long enough to know what I quote unquote should be doing. And my inner child is like terrified,
Yeah.
terrified. So just as much as I want to show up for him and for the relationship, I get to show up for my little one, little Andy. Because when I was a little girl, my family, my friends called me Andy. So when I connect with my little inner child, it's not Andrea, she's Andy. And that's, she wants to be called. And what I noticed is that, and I notice this with my clients too, is like when we start to connect with these younger versions of us and ask them what they need, some people can be very afraid of asking what they need because they are concerned that they're going to ask for too much, that they won't be able to deliver on whatever this aspect of them is asking for. But the truth is they almost never ask for a trip to Disney World that you can't afford. They almost never ask for you to like take the week off work and go play at the park. Often they want to like listen to a song and dance or like watch an old show. Mine sometimes wants to watch like old episodes of Full House because that's what we did growing up. Or they just want your attention. They want to know that their feelings are valid and they want to be witnessed and they want to be affirmed and they want attention just like your own kids. And when we can give them that, they are very ready to soothe themselves or to be soothed. They're very ready to relinquish some of their extreme thoughts and roles because they feel taken care of by you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You mentioned a little way back, like the work is to integrate these parts. So then we can make conscious decisions as our adult self. So how do we integrate these parts? Like you just gave a few examples, like maybe listening to music or watching a show. Is that integration or is that giving them what they need? But can you just explain what you meant by we need to integrate the parts?
Yeah. And by integrate, it's like really bring them into present day. So first and foremost, part of it is acknowledging that these parts exist and not trying to get rid of them. So the first part is just going like, okay, you're allowed to be here. I see you. I feel you. I see that you're here. And I think what a really helpful technique or tool for that is just a simple languaging shift to a part of me. A part of me feels anxious in my partnership. Guaranteed it's not all of me, but like I have other parts that are like having a grand old time that are loving this, but a part of me feels anxious. And I think that that subtle language shift is very empowering because that externalizes that part from like it being me. I am anxious all of the time, and that's a part of my identity. No, it's not.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. First and foremost, part of me. And then second part of that is bringing as much compassion as possible. When we can connect with our parts and meet their needs with love and compassion that's to say, from the energy of our highest self, they can release these extreme roles and beliefs because we're starting to trust ourselves. How many people come to you? People come to me all the time because they don't trust themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what I hear in that is they don't trust their parts and their parts don't trust them. They're not showing up for themselves. And so when we can start to build relationships of trust, meaning showing up for all of these parts, that's the second step. So first, externalizing them as a part of me feels this. Second step, bringing compassion and trust. And then third step is like finding a way to meet their needs and allowing that to be as simple as possible. And it's not as hard as you think. It could just be understanding, compassion, witnessing, but it also might be really something silly. And then the fourth step, which is continuing to make decisions in your life with this like attitude of discernment. And I think this is where like it gets really, really magical because I can say, yeah, a part of me feels really anxious right now. And I love that part of me and it has every right to be here, but it doesn't get to like drive the bus. It doesn't get to touch the radio. It can sit over here. And I, as the grown woman who's actually in the relationship, not the 7-year-old over here, I get to choose. And so being able to discern what is you, your highest self, versus what is a part, and then being able to choose from that way. And so that's about saying to the part, we really understand that you're scared right now. And that makes so much sense to me. This is really scary and I'm here for you. And we're going to try this out with this person. And you can let me know if there's something that you need. And being able to talk to our parts like the internal leader, the internal parent that we always needed. And I think that's where the integration happens is like parts get to be there. They get to be validated. They get to be seen and they don't get to choose. They get to be there while you choose from your higher self.
That's great. I love the language distinction. Like a part of me feels anxious because I feel like a big challenge with many people, and especially if you're not even familiar with any of this work, you just fuse with your parts. You actually think that is it? Like, oh, I am anxious or I'm not ready to do this. If we have this inner critic, like I don't have enough certificates or whatever it is. And we fuse with it. We actually think it could even confuse it as our inner wisdom. And that actually even happened to me at the beginning of my relationship. I'm like, maybe this anxiety is my intuition, which of course I can now differentiate between anxiety and intuition. But if you haven't done the work and you haven't really investigated, you might not be able to. So parts work helps us create a little bit of detachment when we're there for our parts, but we are not our parts. We realize that we are much more expansive and much more whole than that.
So great. The word that we would use in IFS is blended, right? When it just feels like that's who we are, when we feel so consumed by the part. And it's when you're working with an IFS practitioner or a coach can actually help you unblend from those parts so it doesn't feel like it's consuming you. But a really simple way to do that is to see if you can really visualize the part. And what I love to do, and you mentioned this today too, is like feel where it is in the body. And you'll get like an energy or a sense of like where it is. And it might be showing up a stuckness or a heaviness or a constriction somewhere. And then what you can do is just ask that part to come sit in front of you. See if it will be willing to come and like look into your eyes and sit in front of you and have a conversation. And you might have to ask a few times, and it might only be willing to like come sit like directly in front of you. And that's okay if it prefers to stay really, really close. But just being able to do that gives you a little bit of room. Yeah. And with that little bit of room, you can start to feel more relief. So it doesn't feel quite so blended and fused. And then you can start to see it for what it really is, not you.
It's interesting. One of the things that we do in my community a lot is we read Women Who Run with the Wolves by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And really, right at the beginning of the book, she says, our work as women is to call back these dead and dismembered aspects of ourselves. And to me, that really is parts work as well, too. It's like we're getting all of these fragmented parts and we're saying, like, come back. I can take care of you. You're part of me.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
You are not me, but you are part of me.
Yeah, I just had goosebumps. It's exactly that. It's exactly that. It's called calling back all of those fragments of ourselves that society told us that we need to shame and suppress and hide away because they're not enough. And one thing that I've been doing over the last couple months is actually getting people together in small coaching pods. So 3 or 4 people come together and we do internal family systems, IFS parts work all together. And what makes it so magical is people start to see like, oh, I have that part too. Oh, okay. You have that part. I have that part. And we start to see that actually everybody has the same damn parts. They might show up in different ways because of the context of our lives. But it's so beautifully healing to realize that you're not alone in some of these things that you thought were kind of crazy. And in that way, even in your parts get to witness and start to see that like, oh, you have this part and your parts get to feel seen. And in that way, it just gets to be deeply healing on all levels for everybody to be witnessed in that way. And it ends up like really catalyzing the transformation just to be witnessing the ahas of everybody else. Because you're not alone in the part of you that feels like it's a perfectionist. You're not alone in the part that holds anger, or almost everybody has a part that has an addiction or is a pleasure seeking part or an overwhelmed part. Like these are common parts, just like archetypes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's why it's so similar and it's just so like appropriate to a lot of the work that we do in my community. That sounds like a beautiful container too. And I just love what you said about like so many people, we have the same parts. These aren't unique to you. And I think once we recognize that, it takes a lot of the shame and a lot of the angst over it that you are not broken. This is our design as humans on this earthly realm. And I know when I've done inner critic workshops with women in the past, and it's like, okay, type what your inner critic says. They say the same things for the most part, right? They are very similar. Like you said, they might manifest a little bit differently, but we pretty much have similar parts.
Yes. And if there's anybody listening that has an inner critic part, it's really hard to love those parts that are mean, right? You might be sitting there going, great, Andrea, but like, what if my inner critic is a dick? I'm like, they all are. They're very mean. They're vicious. And the bigger the behavior, the bigger the pain. And it can be sometimes hard to connect with these inner critic parts of us, but to know that they too are trying to serve and support and have a highest intention that's actually trying to help us. They actually are. We don't love how they do it. Guaranteed. Nobody wants to be bullied and shamed the way an inner critic does it. And when we get to it, the inner critic is there as this firefighter part who is coming online to really help you in some way, usually viciously trying to keep you small so that you don't get shamed or humiliated somewhere else, oftentimes. And I think of these inner critic parts, again, little bullies on the playground. And when I was a teacher, something that I noticed was like, those bullies on the playground, like the hardest times after school. Like they were the ones whose parents didn't come to parent conferences, or if they did, they sat there on their phones. You know, they were the kids that went home after school and nobody was there and they had to play video games for 3 hours till somebody came home. 'em. And so the bullying showed up as a way to be noticed. And so to get their needs met in their own way. And I had so much compassion for those little ones because I knew what was really going on. And they needed the love and the attention the most. Right. And so if you can start to think of even the most vicious parts of you like that and bring even the slightest amount of compassion to it, imagining it like a little child on a playground and allowing that to elicit this love and compassion and to say to it, I really hear you're scared. I really hear that you need some attention right now. I'm here. Yep. I hear that you're saying those nasty things. Got it. And I'm here for you. And the more that we can like relate to it in that way, it softens and it's willing to relinquish those extreme roles underneath. And compassion is this like underrated, undervalued source of healing. Nothing heals in the energy of judgment, but compassion is this essence that is just deeply healing. And when we can bring that even to the most difficult parts of us to love, we see magic happen.
That's such a great reminder. Thank you. Because it's hard. It's hard to be compassionate to those parts of ourselves when we think they're sabotaging us or we think they're bullying us. It's challenging.
Exactly.
Can you tell me a little bit about what is self in IFS world?
Yeah, I've used the term like higher self a few times. So self is really our natural essence. It's when these parts of us aren't trying to run the show. It's the part of us that is naturally compassionate and curious and calm and courageous. It's this part of us that is naturally confident and has clarity and it's naturally intuitive. Self energy doesn't need to be developed. We just all have it. Everybody I've ever met has self energy, guaranteed. You've had glimmers in your life of experience self energy when you're in nature or when you're in flow or when you're in meditation. And most people, when they tap into this essence, they're like, oh, that's who I really am. That's me. That's me. And so self energy is this ever present energy that is like the spiritual aspect of this work that just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But it is this essence of who we are and connects us to everyone around us. And it's a naturally healing force. If we can bring that level of self energy to our parts, we can start to heal them. And so the idea and what I believe personally is like when clients come to me saying, oh, I want to feel more confident or I want to feel more clear on the next step. Well, you actually already are. We don't need to do a whole ton of like practices to get you to feel more confident, right? There isn't a 3-step plan to confidence. It's actually let's remove or work with the parts that are in the way blocking your natural essence of confidence because it's already there. And that's self energy. And you already have it.
That's good to know that it's not something else that somebody you need to get. You need to order online or anything. You actually already have it. So this is kind of maybe a 2-part question is, are we trying to then, when we're making, let's say, challenging decisions or going about our lives, we're trying to center in self? Is that correct?
I think so. I mean, we've all made decisions in our life that came from like push parts or parts where we felt like we should be doing it this way or things that maybe we made decisions based on what we thought we were supposed to do or what our parents wanted for us. Like parts have done the choosing for us. We have been trained into that growing up in this society is like doing the shoulds. Those are all parts of us that have been indoctrinated because of society. That when we're self-led, rather than the protective parts of us, an inner child running the show, then we actually get to choose from this very aligned and authentic place that often doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And becoming a self-led human begins with coming home to your inner child, leading your parts with acceptance, care, and compassion, turning towards the parts that you've exiled and reparenting them so that you have this new template and way of being. And it's actually through these parts that we can begin to grow and become who we always needed to be. And really, this is the reclamation. This is the reclamation of our power and of our innate worth. And that's really exciting because that's when you get to claim your true desires, the ones that are actually yours, the ones that were placed on your soul in this lifetime, the mission on your heart. And you could start to take those bold steps towards it. And it communicates to all of the parts of you, past and present, that you matter. And that's so exciting. And so we get to choose from that place. And so a lot of people come to coaching because they want something different. They might be in a transition. They know that like what got them here is not what's going to get them there. And that's really about being more tapped in with self, with their self energy, with their truest, highest self, even if some of the answers that we get don't make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm.
What would you advise someone if to identify, like, when do I know whether part is showing up? When I'm connected in self or part? It sounds like it might be obvious, but it's actually not all the time. Obvious.
Yeah, it's not all the times. Yeah.
Right? Like, so is there any key indicators when I'm being led by a part versus being led by self?
So there's any anxiety that you're in a part. If there's a big feeling in any way, whether it's anger, whether it's over the top enthusiasm, you're in a part. Like you just are.
I have to send this text right now is a part. Yes.
Any sense of urgency, a part. This is the ground rule: is self has no agenda but to heal. No agenda. So you can also know, like, if you're feeling neutral about something or like, let's see what happens. Good chance you might be closer to self energy. If you're really tapped into curiosity, right? If you're like, oh, let's try this out. Let's explore this. Good chance you're tapped. There's a higher, percentage of self energy there. If it feels really clear, like maybe not the entire map or plan is clear, but if the next step or two feels like really clear, good chance you're in self energy. If you feel really confident or courageous about it, and maybe not the whole thing, but at least the next step, good chance that you're in self energy. If you're feeling a playfulness with it, good chance it's coming from self energy. And just to note, it's not that you have to 100% be in your self energy all of the time. I think that's an unreasonable request. I've been doing this work for years and years and years now and still get confronted by parts. But what we want is to have like a critical mass of self energy present when we're making important decisions of our lives. We might be able to see the part and see the doubt there and go, okay, that's here. And I actually still feel really curious about this decision. So I'm going to go this way. Yeah. And so I think those are the biggest things to think about when you're deciding is any amount of anxiety, fear, trepidation, that's not it. Any amount of urgency, no, that's not it. Of course, those are there, but if you can do a little bit of work to allow it to unblend from you and see if you can tap into that essence of calm, curiosity, and presence and playfulness, then you're there. And all you need is like a little bit of that self energy to choose from that place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that. It makes me think too, when I was working with some women on intuition, and you can let me know if this resonates. I think sometimes we think if I was just tapped into my intuition or if I was just tapped into self, then life would flow with ease and everything would be perfect. But that's not necessarily the case, because when we're tapped into our self or intuition, we might be asked to make more challenging decisions than if we weren't. So it's not that it's rainbows and unicorns after, but you're more aligned, you're more authentic. So you're more rooted in your own power.
100%. 100%. Life still keeps lifing. Right? Bills still have to be paid. Taxes still happen. We need to take care of our pets, and we have kids that drive us up the wall, and we get stuck in traffic too. Like, still happens. And what I notice in my clients is what they will say 100% of the time. I can say that fairly confidently after the work is like, shit's still happening, but I can handle it. It's not bothering me the way that it used to. It's not derailing me the way that it used to. It's like I can get the nasty email from a parent. I can get cut off in traffic. I can get the extra bill in the mail, and it doesn't throw me off. I know I can handle it. And that's the biggest difference is life keeps lifing, and it's well within what we feel like we can solve for. because we're so much more creative and we're so much more empowered because we're like, okay, whatever's happening, I've got this.
Yeah.
And that's what I want for people, is not for like everything to be rainbows and unicorns and no problems ever to come your way, because there's no growth in that. What I want for people to feel is whatever comes their way, they've got it. To have that sense of empowerment and knowing that whatever gets thrown their way, they can face it. And that, I think, is such a beautiful gift when we can become the solution of our own lives.
Yeah. Oh, so well said. And I think that's so important because that's what we're trying to do here is cultivate that sense of strength and resiliency that I am going to be okay no matter what comes my way, the inevitable ups and downs of life. I will have the skills and the discernment to weather it and to thrive in it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Another question I wanted to ask you, we've talked about kind of like anxiety and urgency in the sense when we recognize that parts are up. And we can think of kind of part of our nervous system too. So how do the parts in the nervous system relate?
Ooh, I love this question because I do a lot of nervous system work with my clients too. When I started working as a coach, because I was a former teacher, I worked with a lot of educators. And if you know any teachers, they are very stressed, very overwhelmed, very anxious. A lot of people are. And so I've done a lot of nervous system work with myself and with my clients. And so the way that I think about it is that we all have this window of tolerance of like what we feel like we can handle on a day-to-day basis. And we can think of this as like capacity. And that window of tolerance or this capacity is informed by many things, many factors. What you ate for breakfast, if you had sex last night, whether you had a hug, whether you had a nourishing meal, whether you've had enough water and enough sleep, your trauma history, all of this informs our window of tolerance. And we can be outside of our window of tolerance, meaning something's happened that is just too much, too fast, too soon that we can't hold and feel like we have the capacity for. And we've had days where the trigger happens, we get activated and we can handle it. And we're like, okay, I've got this. And we've also had days where same thing happens and it just feels like, oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And the way that I think about it is like anytime we're out of our window of tolerance or our capacity is when there's a greater chance for parts to come up. Whether we're above it, our window of tolerance, and we're more anxious and hypervigilant, or whether we're below our window of tolerance, we're feeling more depressed or lethargic or pulling away, or our walls are up, our defenses are up, we're more sleepy. Again, parts are there. And so what we can do is like really intentional work. And what we do through parts work, through shadow work, through nervous system work is we're increasing our capacity to hold whatever life throws at us.
That makes so much sense. And I think it just also helps people recognize to be aware of, where are you? How are you feeling regulated? Did you get a good night's sleep last night? Are you taking care of your body? Are you doing the things that bring you ease, that help you feel grounded? Because when we're not, I know for me, if I don't get a good night's sleep, there's a lot of parts that are activated throughout the day.
Yeah. Exactly that. And when we're in times of transition, if you're changing careers or whether that was your own choice or not, whether you're moving into a relationship or out of a relationship, whether you're moving to houses or countries, or you're in a stage of transition in your family, or having babies, or babies are leaving the nest, we're constantly in transition as humans. And that means that our parts are kind of like bubbling up below the surface because we're being stretched. And it's exactly those times when we get to be more self-aware and expect that, parts are going to come up during these moments of transition because we're being stretched and our capacity is being asked to increase. And this is not a bad thing. I've had clients say to me like, oh, I feel like I've regressed. Oh, I feel like I've gone backwards. And it's not about that. It's just like you're coming to your next level of growth, of transformation, and you're being stretched. And it means parts are going to come up. My parts are up now, stepping into new conscious partnership. And that's okay. I expect that. That's my next level of growth. It's happening at the moment. And that's okay. And we just get to work with them while they're there.
I love one thing that you just said, and I think you said it earlier, but I actually just wanted to reiterate it because I think it's really going to be helpful for women is that as we're growing and evolving, the parts are always going to come up. So it's not that we get to a plateau and it's like, okay, I've integrated them all. It's done. Nothing's going to happen anymore. But and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It could be a sign of growth. It could be a sign that, you're stretching, that you're getting out of your comfort zone. So it's more of recognizing that. And again, kind of connecting with self and tending to our parts.
Exactly. And even like I've heard Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS, he still works with his parts and he made this shit up. So like I discovered he didn't make it up, right? I've been doing this work for years and years and years. And I feel like I'm almost just getting to some of the most core wounding because it's taken time to get past this like beautiful network of protectors. And there's no race. Right? As soon as there's an urgency to be done already, we know that we are in a part and we're not in our self energy. And it certainly does not mean that you failed personal development. You failed personal growth. It's just another level of expansion and growth. And I think that's what we're here for. I think that's why everybody has incarnated on the planet at this time is for this. We're healing for ourselves. We're healing for one another and we're healing for generations to come so that we're creating this ripple effect of consciousness on the planet because nobody's coming to save us. Right? It's pretty obvious with what's happening in the world right now. If there's going to be a shift on the planet and there needs to be, it's us. Right? We are the answer. It is this grassroots uprising, and it's about each and every one of us doing the lifting to heal ourselves and coming together in community, finding guides and leaders that are willing to show us a portion of the path and doing the work together. And that's my why I'm doing this work. I will continue to do it because that is my part. And I will continue to show people the way because I am here in service of consciousness.
So beautiful. Well, I feel like that's like a really beautiful note to start to wrap up on too. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. And also, can you just let folks know if they want to connect with you, if they want to learn more about you, how they can do that?
Yeah, come join me on Instagram. I post regularly tips and strategies and ways to understand IFS and parts work. So come join me there. It's just tessier.andrea. And I would love to share with your listeners, I have a free comprehensive email series that I've designed to unlock the power of inner child and parts work to help people manifest what they truly desire. So over the course of 5 days, you're getting short tutorials, journal prompts, and meditation, some of my favorite practices, really so you can break free from self-sabotage and really manifest whatever it is you're creating, whether it's relationship, abundance, a shift. Yeah, so you can sign up for that. I'm sure Lisa will put the link in the bio. I would love for you to check it out. And yeah, come find me on Instagram and send me a message and let me know that you heard this podcast and would love to connect.
Great. Thank you so much. And yes, I'll have all of Andrea's information in the show notes with the link to her email series. So definitely check it out. And until next time, beautiful ones, I will see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Goddess School podcast. I hope today's episode inspired you to reclaim your feminine magic. Now, don't forget to subscribe to the show. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a review on Apple. If you want to dive deeper into divine feminine archetypes and reconnect with your power, check out my book, The Goddess Solution. It's packed with ancient goddess wisdom for the modern woman. You can find the book on Amazon, and the link is in the show notes. And if you are ready to embrace these practices alongside a global sisterhood, I invite you to join my Divine Feminine Mystery School, Enlivened. It's a supportive space to embody these teachings with a fantastic community of like-minded women. You'll find the link in the show notes. Remember, the goddess isn't a deity outside of you. She's an aspect of your highest self. You are the goddess. Until next time, my friend.